think you know Adolf Hitler. You've never seen him like this before. Hitler's contemporaries, from his birth in Braunau to his death in the bunker, authentically flesh out the picture. Who was Hitler? Hitler neither finished school nor had any vocational training. He occasionally lived in homeless shelters or on the street. He refused to pursue a regular job. To this day, it seems inexplicable that he could come to power. Out of nowhere, Hitler became the Führer, leader of the German Reich, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century, starting an inferno that engulfed the world and brought death to millions of people. The nation worshipped him and followed him blindly into the abyss. But during his lifetime, he kept his origins and his life secret. No one should know how or who he was. Fascinating and oppressive accounts from companions, friends, and enemies, as well as the most extensive collection of archive material ever shown. Much of it, hitherto unpublished, reveal who Hitler was and how he could become what he was. A notorious liar and an unscrupulous murderer. Hitler personally orders a euthanasia program in which mentally and physically handicapped people are liquidated. He underestimates, however, the amount of resistance from the church and is forced to stop the program. But it continues in secret, and in total some 275,000 people are killed. Under the leadership of Göring and Himmler, and with the aid of many helping hands, the extermination of the Jews is carried out on an industrial scale. Some 6 million Jews are murdered. Russian POWs are often killed directly after capture or left to starve to death. Some 50% die, in contrast to 3% of POWs from other nations. More and more of these atrocities become known in Germany, but only rarely is there criticism of such barbarity, as this will almost certainly lead to imprisonment or even deportation to a concentration camp.
His mother went to Mass with little Paula every Sunday. I can't recall that Adolf accompanied his mother to church once. August Kubitschek, childhood friend of Adolf Hitler in Linz.
Hitler had no emotional connection to the church. He thought the Christian religion was an outdated, hypocritical, people-ensnaring institution. Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary.
Diary, October the 10th, 1941. The Führer at table. Christianity is the rebellion against creation. It is the reversal of all laws of nature that are based on struggle and the survival of the fittest, even in the smallest process of fertilization. Walter Havel, Ambassador and SS Oberführer, representative of the Foreign Office with the Führer.
Letter to Franz von Galen, former Catholic Center Party representative in the Prussian Parliament. The national revolution is imposing itself by means of terror. Active opposition will not only be impossible, but also unjust and damaging. 1. We also owe the current government reverence and obedience. 2. We agree internally to a large extent with many of its goals. Nevertheless, Catholics must form a clearly recognizable front. Clemens August Graf von Galen, Bishop of Münster.
Otto Dibelius, Evangelical Superintendent of Kurmark. Sermon in the Church of St. Nicholas in Potsdam on March the 23rd, 1933. With God towards a new future, When it's a matter of the life and death of the country, then the power of the state has to be used decisively and drastically, outwardly or inwardly. We learned from Martin Luther that the Church cannot stay the arm of legitimate state authority, even if it acts rigorously and ruthlessly.
If the people think I'm a religious man, well, that cannot hurt.
Adolf Hitler to photographer Heinrich Hoffmann.
I can say with certainty that even before my departure, I learned about Hitler's intention to liquidate patients with incurable diseases, not only incurable mental patients, in the event of war. His reasoning was that these would be unnecessary mouths to feed. Fritz Wiedemann, personal adjutant of the NSDAP to Adolf Hitler until January the 19th, 1939.
Memoirs in diary form. August the 8th, 1939. Today we witnessed something cruel. Buhler and Bormann showed Hitler the euthanasia film Unworthy Life. It deals with the life and behavior of incurable mental patients in a number of sanatoriums. There was a long discussion afterwards. The Führer had a really harsh attitude. If he had such a child, he would request that it be put out of its misery, not least for the sake of fellow humans. Gerhard Engel, Army Adjutant to Hitler.
For many of Adolf Hitler's crimes, no documents exist that verify his direct and immediate responsibility. It is different with the centrally organized killing of the mentally handicapped, referred to as euthanasia. Sometime in early October 1939, Adolf Hitler signs a backdated order for September the 1st, the day of the start of the war. With his signature, he authorizes Philipp Buhler, the chief of the Führer's chancellery, and Hitler's young personal physician, Karl Brandt.
Reich leader Buhler and Dr. Brandt are entrusted with the responsibility of extending the authority of physicians so that patients who, on the basis of human judgment, are considered incurable can be accorded mercy killing after a definitive diagnosis.
Adolf Hitler.
In October 1939, the killing of the mentally handicapped that Hitler had earlier authorized orally is already well underway.
Memoirs in diary form. October the 4th, 1939. A really serious talk with Brandt. He was in Münster to see Bishop Graf Galen and discuss church problems, among others. The question of the Jews and prisoners was apparently dealt with bluntly by the bishop. Brandt was deeply impressed by his personality and very thoughtful in many ways. Gerhard Engel, Army Adjutant to Hitler.
One day, we were surprised by a report that a euthanasia operation was underway in Swabia. Family members received the ashes with the official notice that the beloved deceased had unfortunately died quite suddenly of pneumonia or from an infectious disease. Through faulty communication of such condolences and sometimes double deliveries of urns, unrest was created among the population and the clergy. Reinhard Spitzi, Austrian member of the SS and NSDAP.
Letter to Minister Hans-Heinrich Lammers.
Your Excellency, Honorable Minister.
From the ranks of the people, both of Württemberg and of Baden,
we've been informed that a large number of mentally handicapped people have been victim to euthanasia in the last few weeks.
We announce our preparedness to pay through charitable means all costs borne by the state
for the care of the mentally ill condemned to death. With special reverence and esteem, Dr. Max Kottmann, Vicar General of Rottenburg.
Konrad Gröber, Archbishop of Freiburg.
The Bishop of Münster, Clemens August Graf von Galen, finds the courage to deliver a frank opinion in public. In his sermon on August 3rd, 1941, the bishop announces that he has definitive knowledge that death transports of sick patients have also taken place from local nursing homes, upon which he files a complaint with the state prosecutors.
Sermon in St. Lambert's Church, Münster, August 3rd, 1941. So now we must expect that poor, defenseless, sick people will be killed sooner or later. Do you, or do I, only have the right to live as long as we are recognized as productive by others? If it is legitimate to kill unproductive members of the community, then woe betide our brave soldiers who return home from war with serious battle wounds as invalids. If the principle that man is entitled to kill his unproductive fellow man is established and applied, then woe betide all of us when we become aged and thus unproductive. Clemens August Graf von Galen.
Von Galen's sermon spreads rapidly through the German Reich and among the soldiers of the Wehrmacht. As early as October, reports are circulating in the British government about the Bishop of Münster's extraordinarily courageous and outspoken sermons.
Diary, Sunday, January the 19th, 1941. I never thought I'd admire anything Hitler did, but today, when I read in the Sunday Express that he painlessly gassed some thousands of lunatics, I did so. I believe firmly in euthanasia in incurable cases, whether of cancer, etc., or of mind disease. Far from being cruel, I think it's the reverse, and cruel in the extreme to withhold the gift of sleep. To my intense surprise, my husband agreed heartily and went further. He said he thought every able-bodied nurse and doctor will have enough to do to succour and bring health to the mentally fit, and that all food and services will be needed for the sick and wounded. By the time he had finished, I felt I could have held a brief for the other side and argued from that angle. I'm dreadfully balanced at times and can see both sides. Nella Last, housewife, Lancaster.
Von Galen's brave protest is based on concrete critical points and is successful. The conflict between the Hitler regime, the Bishop of Münster, and other public critics is settled only partially. Hitler suspends the largest part of the euthanasia program for more than a year, after more than 70,000 people had been killed. In less conspicuous forms, the euthanasia program was reintroduced to sanatoriums and nursing homes and practiced right up to the end of the war.
The racial ideology, a lot of people believed, was just theory and election propaganda. Leni Riefenstahl, director and actress.
During our conversation, among other things, I asked him the following question. An old friend of mine lives here in Berlin. He is Jewish, was an officer in the war, and was highly decorated. How should I treat him now? Hitler answered me in his mildest tone.
Ah, Wiedemann, in your position I would behave in a humane, decent manner. Maybe it would be good if you didn't let yourself be seen with him in public too often in your present position. But as I say, I would behave in a humane, decent manner.
Fritz Wiedemann.
At the time of the Polish campaign, Hitler occasionally remarked while travelling through the country that he was compelled by the feeling that he should now solve the Jewish problem in Poland, just like in the German sphere of influence. In Poland, it would be necessary to crack down more rigorously than in the Reich under the Nuremberg laws. Heinz Linger, valet to Adolf Hitler.
The Führer called me into the Reich Chancellery at 4 p.m. today. To start with, he spent a whole hour describing the campaign in Poland. The Poles, only a thin Germanic layer. Underneath that, dreadful stock. The Jews, the worst that you could possibly imagine. Only a master's heavy hand could rule here. Alfred Rosenberg, Director of the Foreign Policy Office of the NSDAP.
Any German that was in uniform and carried a weapon could do whatever he wanted with a Jew in Warsaw. He could force him to sing or dance, or fall to his knees and beg for his life. He could suddenly shoot him or kill him in a slower, more painful way. Nobody called them to account. Marcel Reich-Renitsky, German-Polish Jew in the Warsaw Ghetto.
2 days later, I went to the Warsaw Ghetto. A brick wall about 8 feet high had been built around the entire desolate area, from which all the Aryans had been evacuated and into which more than 400,000 Jews had been forced. The entire population of the ghetto seemed to be living in the street. There was hardly a square yard of empty space. As we picked our way across the mud and rubble, the shadows of what had once been men or women flitted by us in pursuit of someone or something, their eyes blazing with some insane hunger or greed. Frequently, we passed by corpses lying naked in the streets. Jan Karski, courier of the Polish Underground.
The apartments below were now occupied by German officers. One German officer, perfectly polite, clicked his heels, took a bow, raised his arm and said, "Heil Hitler!" He presented himself with the exaggerated smile of a fanatic, announced he had 3 sons. 2 of them had already died for the Führer. With his face ecstatically Wagnerian, he declared, looking out at the row of chestnut trees, "One thing I promise you, the day will come when you'll see a Jew hanging from every branch." Tommy Ungerer, a child under the Nazis.
For us, the Polish, it was a question of war and occupation. For them, for the suffering Polish Jews, this was the end of the world. They were not afraid of death itself, and indeed accepted it as something almost inevitable. Added to this realization was the bitter knowledge that in this war, for them, there could be no hope of any victory whatsoever, none of the satisfaction which sometimes softens the prospect of death. Jan Karski, Story of a Secret State.
Calendar of events at concentration camp Auschwitz-Birkenau. January the 25th, 1940. The head of the Central Office informs the Reichsführer SS, Heinrich Himmler, that a camp will soon be built near Auschwitz, that is planned as a type of state concentration camp.
So when the establishment of Auschwitz grew more pressing, I was named commander of the future Auschwitz quarantine camp. That was way off in Poland. Rudolf Höss, member of the SS from November 1934.
A pretty barbaric process is being employed that cannot be described in detail. Not much remains of the Jews themselves. Generally, you can say that 60% of them have to be liquidated, while only 40% can be used for labor. Joseph Goebbels, diary.
Höss's cell. Examined Rudolf Höss, 46, commandant of the Auschwitz concentration camp. In answer to my rather naive questions as to how many people could be done within an hour, he explained that one must figure it out on a daily 24-hour basis, and it was possible to exterminate up to 10,000 in one 24-hour period. I tried to figure out how this was done, but he corrected me.
The killing itself took the least time. You could dispose of 2,000 people in half an hour, but it was the burning that took all the time.
Gustav Mark Gilbert, Nuremberg Diary.
Once, when the Führer was looking through more of Himmler's detailed directives, he said jokingly, "Himmler is a teacher, like his father, actually an ideal Reich Minister of Culture." And then, after a short pause, "But I need him where he is." Heinz Linger.
Calendar of events at concentration camp Auschwitz-Birkenau, June the 10th, 1940. The technical design of a coal-heated cremator by J.A. Topf and Sons, incinerator manufacturers in Erfurt, was customized for the cremation of corpses in the Auschwitz concentration camp.
The occasional comment, "If only the Führer knew about it," was a total misconception. Hitler heard about and knew everything. Heinz Linger.
Memoirs in diary form, February the 2nd, 1941. Keitel, Bormann, Hevel, Lai, Speer, present. The Jewish question once again discussed intensely. The Führer gave a longer explanation of what he thinks. First of all, the war is accelerating the solution to this question. On the other hand, more difficulties are arising. Originally, he was only in a position to break the Jewish power in Germany. Now, the goal will have to be to shut down Jewish influence in the entire sphere of Axis power. If he only knew where you could put a few million Jews, there aren't really that many. He is planning to demand the French make room for a settlement on the island of Madagascar. When Bormann asked how they should get there during the war, the Führer answered, "One would have to think about that." Gerhard Engel.
For a long time, researchers and prosecutors searched for a definitive written order from Hitler for the murder of European Jews. Such an order from Hitler on the final solution of the Jewish question obviously doesn't exist.
Service calendar Heinrich Himmler, Himmler's lecture notes. Führer Headquarters, Führer, Wolfschanze, July the 18th, 1941, 4 p.m. Jewish question, exterminators partisans, restructuring of the Waffen-SS.
Letter of appointment to Reinhard Heydrich, July the 31st, 1941. As a supplement to your assigned task issued on January the 24th, 1939, to solve the Jewish question in the form of emigration or evacuation by the best possible solution according to the time frame, I hereby authorize you to make all necessary preparations in organizational, factual, and material measures for the final solution of the Jewish question in German spheres of influence in Europe. Hermann Göring, Marshal of the Reich.
In the same way Hermann always tried to keep everything unpleasant away from me, he also seemed intent on avoiding a discussion with me over these arrangements. However, I cannot imagine that he was informed of the extent of the subsequent terrible events. Emmy Göring.
In any case, I'm totally convinced, even without written proof, that the extermination of the Jews goes back to a specific order from Hitler, because it's unthinkable that Himmler and Göring would have carried this out without his knowledge. Nikolaus von Below, Luftwaffe Adjutant to Adolf Hitler.
Vilnius, July 1941. Over the radio, we heard how close the German military was to Vilnius. Unrest spread, and we held our breath. What would happen now? Very next day, the SS thugs appeared and hung up posters with various decrees. Jews have to give up their furs, radios and bicycles, etc. They hunted people, forced the Jews out of their homes, and dragged them off for forced labour. Paja Wapner-Lewin, Polish-Lithuanian Jew.
Diary, Monday, September the 8th, 1941. More heavily overcast, not unpleasant, cool. The Jews now have to wear a yellow badge in Germany and can only leave their homes with a permit. Otto Blumenthal, Jewish-German mathematician, in exile, Netherlands.
I believe that simple people behave more decently than so-called cultured or semi-cultured people. A typical example is the story of the worker who gave up a seat in a tram to a Jewish woman with a star patch. "Have a seat, me old starshine," he said. And when a party comrade complained, he snapped in broad Berlin slang, "The only person in charge of my ass is me." Ursula von Kardorff, journalist, diary.
One particular memory. I was sent to Stuttgart on a story. The event was practically over and we were having lunch. Suddenly the door burst open. An SS officer entered and said to the gathering, "Horrible things are happening." And then he reported in detail about the abduction and killing of the Jews. The whole circle was stunned by this report that was, as it were, quite fresh. All the participants were petrified with horror. Elisabeth Müller-Neumann, publicist and journalist.
Vilnius, autumn 1941. Then it was announced that Jews were only allowed on the streets until 6 p.m. They had to walk in the gutter with the horses and weren't allowed on the pavement. They were hunted and dragged off to hard labour, without consideration of age, or taken hostage, so they could be bought free for a lot of money. Paya Wapner-Levine.
As yesterday, but warmer, 22 degrees Celsius in the midday shade. Farewell letter from Frau Amberg before deportation. Maas and his wife chose death over deportation. Sad fate. Brave people. Otto Blumenthal, Utrecht.
I didn't know anything about the existence of SS death squads that killed Jews and other ethnic groups behind the front. Bernd Freitag von Loinghofen, Major.
Immediately after the invasion of the Soviet Union by the Wehrmacht, the 3,000-man death squads of security police and the Reich Security Service begin their killing operations. The political responsibility lies with Hermann Göring, to whom Hitler has transferred the coordination of Jewish policy.
If I am asked whether I knew about the shooting of the Jews, I have to say that I received an order to attend the shooting of Jews as a spectator. I remember that we had to be at the shooting site at 8 p.m. A Navy Captain Lipaia.
Out of curiosity to see what was happening, I followed the truck in my car. It stopped near the beach. The execution was attended by countless German spectators from the Navy and the German Railway. Leader of the 2nd Company, 13 Battalion, Police Reserves.
I saw a long, deep ditch. SS men and Latvian police, in plain clothes wearing armbands, were standing beside it. The terrain was overgrown with bushes, and the ground was sandy. We watched about 1.5 hours of the execution. During this time, 3 to 4 trucks were brought in from the city to the shooting site. Then the victims were driven like cattle from the truck to the ditch. Each time, 5 had to march in single file into the ditch. A Navy captain.
Around noon, an old man from Lower Saxony, Colonel Scheer, visited me. Among the things he talked about that were especially horrible was the shooting of Jews. He'd been told by another colonel, Tippelskirch, I believe. Ernst Junge, Captain, Paris, Diary.
The shooting took place under the command of the SS. The victims stood facing us. I can remember exactly that after the salvos, the victims collapsed. A Navy captain.
Letter to the SS and Latvian police chief, commander of the Riga police force, January the 3rd, 1942. The execution of the Jews carried out in the time frame of the report is still the talk of the local population. The fate of the Jews is deplored numerous times, and at the moment, you hear few people in favor of their elimination. Among other things, there is a rumor circulating that the execution was filmed. SS and Police Chief Lipaia.
By the way, these shootings will be stopping because they've gone over to gassing the victims. Ernst Junge.
Diary, Dachau, February the 6th, 1943. Shooting is noisy and attracts attention. You can gas people quietly, at home as it were. Edgar Kupfer-Korbowitz, German concentration camp prisoner, Dachau.
The latest research findings are that in autumn 1941, Heinrich Himmler, after consultation with Hitler, gives the order to kill all Jews in central Poland if they cannot be used for forced labor.
Memoirs in diary form. A grim, gloomy mood. Führer had a long discussion with Himmler, and afterwards there was the usual corresponding atmosphere. Gerhard Engel.
It was clear that there were concentration camps. In the summer of 1942, I was wonderfully received as a vacation child on special leave by the farming family Hasselforder in Regisheim. The meals are magnificent. And I remember that it was talked about at the time that the soap was made from the bones of Jews. Tommy Ungerer, My Childhood in Alsace.
Hitler never told me anything about the treatment of the Jews. In foreign policy, the subject only arose when the Jews were to be deported from some country or other. Franz von Sonnleitner, NSDAP member, after 1939 legation counselor in the Foreign Ministry.
Circular of the Germany Department of the Foreign Ministry to the representatives of the Foreign Office with the military commanders. With respect to the Reich Commissioners in German-occupied countries. February the 20th, 1942. The following is explained in detail. To dispel recurrent doubts, I make it known that Jews of the following countries, former Poland, former Luxembourg, Slovakia, Croatia, Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, former Estonia, former Lithuania, former Latvia, Norway, and stateless Jews in those regions are to be included in the measures and pending measures taken generally against the Jews. Jews of Italian, Finnish, Swiss, Spanish, Portuguese, Danish, and Swedish nationality have the opportunity until March the 31st, 1943, to return to their so-called homelands, as long as security police have no specific objections. Jews of other countries, as well as enemy states, neutral or affiliated, are not allowed to be included in the Jewish measures.
You will recall the Reichstag session at which I declared, if Judaism imagines for a moment that it can bring about an international world war for the extermination of the European races, the result will not be the extermination of the European races, but the extermination of the Jews in Europe. I was always derided as a prophet. Countless numbers of those who laughed at the time are no longer laughing today. Those who are still laughing now will perhaps not be laughing much longer. Adolf Hitler, November the 8th, 1942.
Letter, Legitnovo, December the 16th, 1942. Additional charge, 18 groschen. Warsaw, with the polite request to post this letter. Today we left Plonsk. Our entire family and all Jews went. You should know that we're going to the wedding. Goodbye. David.
Sunday, February the 14th, 1943. The shocking news on the wireless about the murder of so many Jews by the Germans. Nella Last, housewife, Lancaster.
There was another reason for our reluctance to believe the ghastly to be true. A deep, indestructible attachment to German and Austrian culture. What did I resist for so long, that so many months would pass before I was in a position to trust the rumors of the industrial-scale mass extermination? I was resisting a split with Germany. Mannes Sperber, Austrian Jewish writer.
There are Jews, there are even some here, that are die-hard admirers of the Germans. They praise IG Farben, Zollingen, and the Zeiss works, compliment German orderliness, the industriousness, and the cleanliness of the Germans. Quote Goethe, Wagner, Beethoven, Koch, and Bering. Their hearts bleed because Germany is now in the state it is in. Erner Schepp, Hungarian Jewish writer.
Red Cross letter to Margrethe Blumenthal.
From April the 21st, 1943.
Move to the Dutch Jewish camp tomorrow.
The baptized will not be deported from Holland.
We're healthy and hopeful.
Stay this way too.
Try to continue writing.
All our love. Otto Blumenthal.
Mali Blumenthal, German Jew, in exile in the Netherlands.
Diary, Thursday, April the 22nd, 1943. Last diary entry. Departure to Vught. Otto Blumenthal.
Otto Blumenthal and his wife Marley are first taken away to Camp Vught, the Hertogenbosch concentration camp, then to the transit camp Westerbork. Here, Marley Blumenthal dies in May 1943. German Jewish mathematician Otto Blumenthal writes two nearly identical letters to his children from the Westerbork camp on May the 21st, 1943.
Red Cross letter to Margrethe Blumenthal, England. Mother died today. Pneumonia. Westerbork Camp Hospital. She has been released. Thought a lot about you. Stay strong. Honor her memory. Wishing you the best future. Otto Blumenthal.
Otto Blumenthal dies in Terezin on November the 13th, 1944.
A letter to Minister Hans Fröhlicher, Swiss ambassador in Berlin, Röndorf am Rhein, October the 5th, 1943. As regards the Jewish question, news is trickling through that the evacuated Jews have been completely wiped out. Their property has been officially confiscated by the state. Franz Rudolf von Weiss, Consul of the Swiss Confederacy in Cologne.
Danziger Vorposten daily newspaper, May the 13th, 1944. Jewry records major losses in other regions of Europe. The core areas of Jewish settlement that we found in Poland, like those in Warsaw and Lublin, have today been neutralized. The settlements of 1.5 million Jews in Hungary are currently being dealt with in a similar fashion. Thus, in these countries alone, 5 million Jews have been eliminated. In other European countries, long-standing state measures against Jewry are also increasing. Wilhelm Löbsack, provincial NSDAP propaganda director in Gdansk, West Prussia.
During a military briefing around autumn 1944, the Reich press chief Dietrich came up with an English report. In this newspaper article, it was alleged that the Russians had taken a German concentration camp by the name of Majdanek. Pictures showed racks, on which a large number of combs could be seen, well laid out, as foreigners expect to see in a German institution. The text said that people had been exterminated here. Dietrich presented the press report to Hitler. We stood there with bated breath to hear what he would say. The answer was swift.
Those are the hands of Belgian children chopped off during the First World War. It's nothing but enemy propaganda.
I believe that I have quoted Hitler's statement correctly. In any case, we were all relieved. Franz von Sonnleitner.
Each person bade farewell to life in his own way. Some prayed, others drank. Yet all night long, mothers lovingly cared for travel provisions, washed their children, and at dawn the barbed wire was full of children's clothing hung to dry in the wind. They also thought about toys and the hundreds of small things that children always needed. Wouldn't you do the same thing? If one were to kill you and your child tomorrow, wouldn't you give him something to eat today? Primo Levi, chemist, Jewish Italian partisan, notes in the freight car on the way to Auschwitz.
I, Zaporozhet's Nikolai Semyonovich, born in 1922, served on the new border in Brest before the war. I was second lieutenant and platoon leader in an artillery regiment. The war surprised me while on duty around 4 a.m. The German troops had attacked us at dawn. We had to fight while retreating. When we reached the old border, only one cannon remained. The regiment was totally destroyed. A lot of soldiers and officers died. At Minsk, I could not break out of the encirclement and was taken prisoner on July the 3rd, 1941. Nikolai Zaporozhets.
On the third day of the war, I was wounded near Grodno. When I came to, there were many wounded lying on the ground. We were at the mercy of the German soldiers. After a while, those who could move were driven onwards. My comrades grabbed me under the arms because those who fell over were immediately shot. Dmitry Dmitrienko.
Soroka on the Dniester River, August the 4th, 1941. A train of prisoners awaits. Their heads loll back and forth with tiredness and heat. They unavoidably answer da, yes, to all of my questions. They look at me wide-eyed, a small dark lamp of fear gleaming in them. The German soldier who guards them says to me that they are frightened. They are afraid of being shot at any moment. The German soldier laughs. Gurzio Malaparte, author and war correspondent of the Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera.
Since February 1938, Adolf Hitler has been the supreme commander of the military. In this capacity, he's responsible for the mass killings of Soviet prisoners of war. Whereas 1 to 3% of Anglo-American prisoners die, some 50% of Red Army prisoners perish. Of the roughly 5.3 to 5.7 million Red Army soldiers in German captivity, 2.5 to 3.3 million die. Estimates vary.
Interrogation. U.S. POW camp at Fort Hunt, May the 19th, 1945. We didn't take any Russian prisoners at the start. After all, the Führer himself said that they weren't human. Then they shot everyone who was a political commissioner. You relied on denunciation from the companies. Then the Russians said, as long as that happened, every German officer would be shot. But there had already been a lot of people killed. Fritz Sandrat, anti-aircraft colonel.
Protocol of the Interrogation of Prisoner of War Waldemar Bredal, interpreter of the 389th Infantry Division, Dubovka, 6th of February 1943. Concerning the condition of the Russian prisoners of war, Bredal said that an order was issued saying that for every escapee, 2 prisoners would be shot. This command was initiated because the incidence of escapes in January was significantly higher. In Bredal's words, this order was never carried out.
Letter, Berlin, August the 26th, 1941. The news from the East is terrible again. We are obviously suffering very, very large losses. This might be tolerable if it weren't for the hecatombs of corpses hanging around our necks. We keep hearing reports that only 20% of prisoners or Jews being transported arrive alive, that hunger is prevailing in POW camps, that typhoid and all sorts of other epidemics have broken out. Helmut James von Moltke, member of staff in German military intelligence.
The first camp, an area enclosed by barbed wire in the open air, was situated not far from the city of Nesterov. They let us more or less starve. Maxim Tebenko, Soviet prisoner of war from the Ukraine.
The onset of winter sees the prisoners nearly defenseless and accelerates their decimation. Army Command is fully aware of the situation and condones the starvation of Soviet prisoners. In November 1941, when the chiefs of staff of the East Armies tell the Quartermaster General that the armies need Soviet prisoners as laborers, but that these are starving in camps, he states,
prisoners of war who do not work have to starve. Working prisoners of war can, in some cases, be fed army provisions. Eduard Wagner, Quartermaster General.
Letter to Wilhelm Keitel. The fate of the Soviet prisoners of war is a tragedy of huge proportions. The large majority of them have starved or died from exposure to the weather. Alfred Rosenberg, Minister for the Occupied Eastern Territories.
Such doubts belong to soldierly concepts of chivalrous warfare. Here we are dealing with the destruction of an ideology. For this reason, I approve and support these measures. Wilhelm Keitel, Chief of the Armed Forces High Command.
Only the gravediggers were given food. The camp was set up in a dense forest, a pine forest. We scratched the bark off with a nail and fed ourselves that way. After a while, the whole forest had been eaten. Boris Sheremet.
Albert Speer, Reich Minister of Armaments and War Production. In a lengthy explanation, the Führer makes very clear that he does not agree with the insufficient feeding of the Russians. The Russians must have adequate nourishment. The Führer is surprised that civilian Russians behind barbed wire are treated like prisoners of war. I explained to him that this is due to a directive that he issued. The Führer is not aware of any such directive.
I keep hearing that Hitler could not have known about everything. This is sheer nonsense. I know from personal observation and remarks by Hitler that he knew everything. Heinz Linger.
My salvation was that I came to Austria as a prisoner of war and worked there in a company where cotton wool and yarn were produced and in road building, thanks to the Austrian workers who secretly gave us food. Fyodor Cherniak.